Hey Andrew, how's it going?
Mike, what's up? Thanks for having me on, brother.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for joining me. For everyone who's listening, could you just take a little bit of time and let them know who you are and what you do?
For sure. Yeah, my name's Andrew Petcash. I graduated from Boston University here last May, so only 5, 6 months ago. Played basketball there. I've always kind of built things on the side, some online businesses while in school. Then
Mhm.
NIL hit, and I was like, dang, I missed out on the whole boat by 6 months. So just through social media, I built up pretty big Twitter following in recruiting. Jumped into NIL. I'm still meeting a bunch of cool people, and we've developed this app. Air takes the concepts of LinkedIn and Tinder, applies it to college recruiting, and then as NIL is moving downstream, we're starting to see some of that collaboration. And then I started writing as well um, on the side. And it's led to some pretty cool opportunities. I actually am going to have a co-hosted show for 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh. It's like one of the biggest radio stations um, at the start of the new year. So yeah, I found kind of how we were talking about earlier before the show, the entrepreneur journey, putting yourself out there, no risk, no reward, and it's paid off. But there's ups and downs. It's been fun. Um, it doesn't matter you're my age or yours. I mean, you just got to get started. So I
Absolutely.
know I know we were going to talk about that a little later of what's your word, but figured let's get started right off with that. If you're listening to this, you're already doing the right thing. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I love all of it, and there's a lot to get into. And we'll get into NIL stuff, but those who aren't familiar and are listening, what does NIL stand for? And could you just talk a little bit about that?
yeah, I should have touched on that before, but NIL is name, image, likeness. So it's basically allows you to make money off your own name. It applies to college athletes now, but it really applies to everyone. You can your name, image, likeness is who you are, your personal brand, and can you make money off of it? And a lot of that stems today from social media.
Yep. I'm really curious about that, so we'll definitely get into that later. But I guess to take a step back, right? You said you're a basketball player at Boston University. So can you just kind of talk about your athletic background and how you got there?
Yeah, I had a crazy. That's kind of how I got started in all this. Is I had a crazy story. Um, I my junior year, I got a few Division 1 offers. I was working hard. I knew what I wanted, and I committed to Army West Point, thinking, "Oh, this is what I want to do." But I didn't really completely understand the whole military that you have to go serve for 5 years after. Threw me in a loop. I decommit, lose all my offers. It's senior year. I'm at graduation in June. Everyone knows where they're going to college. They've known for months, and I'm just sitting there going, "What am I doing?" Thinking about going to prep school. And as soon as I do that, I start playing again because I can go down a grade and start playing in those tournaments. And Boston University comes and they say, "Hey, we want to offer you for next year after your prep school year." I'm like, "Great, whatever." Then maybe a month goes by, 10 days before I'm supposed to go to prep school, 7 days before Boston University starts school. The head coach calls me and goes, "Hey, we had some trouble. One of the guys isn't on the team anymore. Would you want to come this year?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, like let's do it." And it turned out great. Um, and actually, funny enough, my first day on campus, just talk about adversity, I broke my wrist playing pickup. So I missed the whole off season, and somehow in the second half of the season, I still found a way to get some playing time. But yeah, it was a crazy journey. It was like, hey, you finally got here, and then you break your wrist on the first day. So that was pretty wild.
Wow, that is pretty crazy. But can you talk about the army situation a bit more? I mean, obviously, I'm always fascinated because I don't really understand how that works. Because the admission process to the military academies is so unique when they're recruiting athletes. Like, what did that look like for you? And like, at what point were you like, "Whoa, I'm not sure what I'm getting into"?
Yeah, I mean, they put on a great visits. They took me to a football game. They have all the traditions,
Hmm.
and it's awesome. And they really bring you into the culture. The coaches are great. They're still great. The same guys there that recruited me. And actually, they're in our conference, so we played them 2 times a year. And it was always, I wouldn't say it was awkward, but he kind of hated me because I decommitted actually on signing day from there. So I kind of screwed them. Just just as, I mean, I screwed myself and screwed them a little bit. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of tradition. They do a lot of cool stuff, but they're not. I would say they're not the best team. It's hard to recruit there, but
Mhm.
they do kind of. I wouldn't say they cover up the military, but they don't make it an emphasis enough, in my opinion. So like I didn't really realize like, yo, you're waking up at 6 every day, you're eating the same meals with everyone in the school. You're going to serve for 5 years after. There's no getting out of it. And at the time I wanted to play pro basketball overseas after. So I was like, well, I can't do that if I have to go to the army. So that actually got me out. And then funny enough, last year I get to the same point. I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to play pro basketball anymore. So the whole reason I didn't go there just completely changed in 4 years, which is pretty wild. But yeah, no, I respect them. I have some
Mhm.
buddies that go there, and it's an awesome place. I would love to give back in some way possible at some point
Yeah.
because it still touched me a little in my life, even though I didn't go there.
Cool. So did you play other sports growing up through high school?
Yeah, I was a big baseball player till ninth grade, and then my AAU coach. And sometimes I joke about this with my family, like, hey, like I'm a 6'4", not the most athletic kid in the world. I should have played baseball. I would have had a chance to go pro. Like basketball, like I mean, you know how it is. It's a little tougher.
Yep.
Um, so we joke about that. That was my main sport. And then my AAU coach came along and introduced me to like Curry, and he was awesome. And playing with some pro guys that were overseas
Mhm.
locally. And I also played tennis in high school. And then yeah, I mean, I just kind of fell in love with basketball
Mhm.
and was like, hey, let's do it. It's really hard to get there, and I wanted the biggest challenge, which
Yeah.
I still think it's the hardest. The most, you have to be the most athletic to play basketball, and I still think, and obviously this is my opinion, you get everyone to fight you on this, but I think it's the hardest sport to be good at. So
Tell me more about that. I'm curious about that now. So what do you think distinguishes basketball? What makes it the hardest?
yeah, I mean, it's skill plus athleticism and
Mm.
plus size and strength. Football, I mean, there's tons of examples. Like football players will say, "Oh, it's the most athletic." Yeah, it's the most athletic, strength, size, whatever. But you don't see, a basketball player. I'm sorry, you don't see a football player that could go play in the NBA. LeBron James could go play in the NFL instantly, and that's a lot of my gauge as well.
Mm.
And you can teach a basketball player to play any sport and be decent. Um, you see Michael Jordan goes and plays professional baseball. Now, I mean, was he the best player ever? No, but he could do it. Um, and I mean, there's tons of good athletes. It's hard to say, especially when you get to that elite level. But even like Steph Curry is a really good golfer. No golfer could ever go play professional basketball. So that's kind of my gauge. I mean, ton of variables there. But
Uh,
yeah.
I think the one, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. I certainly think there's an argument for it. I think the thing for me that makes basketball so challenging is the decision making aspect because you're moving so fast. The game moves so quickly, especially in the shot clock model, right? Where you have to make choices constantly and you have to do it within a split second. And I think a lot of sports don't have that. I mean, unless you're a quarterback, right? In football, maybe a soccer player, but the game moves much more slowly. Hockey, perhaps you're on skates, right? But the decision making is what is hard for me. Like and I'm really interested in that as a sports psychology professional. Is like how do the greatest athletes make decisions? Like what do they see? How do they anticipate? Like what is a process their brain goes through? And I think for me, when you couple that with the jumping, the running, the physicality, all that, that makes basketball a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah, it's just a combination of so many things.
Mhm.
It's I mean, what do you think's the hardest sport? Like if you had to kind of pick, what would you go? What would you
That's a
lean
great
towards?
question. I mean, it's hard because I'm exposed to all of them, and they all have their own unique elements. To be honest with you, you sort of like in saying that, like I could certainly make the argument for basketball because of all the things, especially as you move up
Yeah.
in level, right? I think if you're, in high school, right, it might be different than if you're playing in college where like, you might go from being the best player on your team in high school because you're just a dead-on shooter, and then you step up to college, especially at the Division I level, and guys can shoot, but they also can jump out of the gym, right? Right?
Yeah.
Like they're strong and they're right, like they're quick, and like then you're sort of like running up against these guys who are just freakish, right? In a lot of ways, and I think that could be the argument. I think quarterback is probably the hardest position to play in all of sports.
Yep.
I wouldn't kind of
I agree
it's
with you
hard
on
to
that one.
deviate from that, but I love it. I love the conversation because there are so many variables that go into being great at any sport, and it's not just the physical stuff.
Yeah. Now, what do like you obviously work with a bunch of athletes? I'm sure basketball players. I mean, what are some things they kind of say are difficult, or they have a tough time mentally, getting around to? Because for me, the thing was always being like aggressive and mentally like I could go score 20 points in a game, especially in high school. But then it was like you play a game the next night, and it's like how do you like replicate that consistently? Because you play a lot of games in basketball. So I'm just kind of
Mhm.
curious, like what other mental stuff or psychology stuff that you've found.
The things I've seen, because I have worked with basketball players, I think the biggest challenge relates to dealing with failure, right?
Hmm.
So if a player makes a bad doesn't make a play, right? They make a mistake, say they miss a shot, and they tell themselves, I should have made that shot. It stays with them and they can't shake it. And they can't see that the decision, right? Like I'll go back to this. They can't see it was a good decision, right? They made a good choice. They took an open shot, they just missed it, but they're beating themselves up for missing the shot. And the truth of the matter is you're going to miss 5 or 6 shots out of 10 anyway. But you made a good choice. So rather than just saying, "Hey, I made a good choice, I'm going to pull it again the next time I have it," they start to think like, "Oh, I should have made that." They get into their own head and they lose trips up and down the court because they're so focused on the mistake that they made 3, 4, 5 plays ago. And that's something
Yep.
I've actually worked on with basketball players. Like, hey, all right, let it go. How do we let it go and move on to the next play? Because otherwise, you're distracted and you can't be at your
Hmm.
best. And then you're going to get beat on the defensive end because you're caught up in your own head, and some guy's going to go right past you, right? So, I think that's probably the biggest thing with basketball, and it applies to other sports.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but but basketball, because you're also five guys away from the ball, like you can get like caught up into a fog if you're not on ball, and so it's a challenge.
Yeah,
Confidence.
no, yeah, you made a bunch of great points there. So actually, another thing, same trying to stay busy, but my dad's the high school basketball coach at where I'm from now, and so I'm
Hmm.
helping him coach this year a little bit on the side. And we have some kids that are really good shooters, but it's the same kind of thing. Like they miss a shot, and I was never this way, so wasn't a problem for me, luckily,
Hmm.
because my dad, when I was young, would always just say, "It's the next shot. Go one for one. Go one for one. Go one for one." So when I missed, it was never a problem. Um, but I also wasn't like a huge volume shooter. I always prided myself on being an efficient player.
Hmm.
Like, hey, let's go score 20 points, but let's do it in 10 shots. Where there's other guys, they would go score 20, but they'd take 30. And I'm like, did you really help your team? So in a way, yeah, I mean, I didn't like missing shots, but I prided myself on like, hey, like let's be efficient.
Right, but that also goes back to the decision making piece of it, right? You are maybe without using those terms, you are making a conscious decision to make good choices, right? If I'm open, I'm going to take it. The situation lends itself, I'm going to take it, but I'm not going to just shoot to shoot, right? And
Yep.
I think that that's part of the decision making, part of being a smart player, but also understanding risk and reward. Like, why am I going to take this shot now? If there's a better look, right? There's one more pass to be made. Yeah, I can make this, but is it better for me to look off and get it to the next guy to move the ball? And that's also something that I love to watch as a fan and a coach is that one extra pass, knowing that okay, I got a good open look, but if I make one more pass, is that a better option? And the guys who make that extra pass just like are the best players because they're
Yeah.
creating movement in the defense that you can't get by standing still.
Yeah. I mean, a pass will always beat the dribble up the floor.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. I mean, that's why when the Warriors, a lot of people gave them a lot of crap, but they were the most fun team maybe of all time to watch
Yeah.
because they played really hard. They weren't the tallest, they weren't the quickest, they weren't the fastest. They played the right way, and that was always fun watching them.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I coached I worked with a coach who on a basketball team who played basketball in college. One of the smartest basketball guy, and more smart guy in general, but one of the
Mhm.
smartest guys I've ever met basketball wise. And he was on my podcast, and he always would say, "Throw ahead, throw ahead, throw ahead." He would just hit them over the head in practice, like throw the ball up the court, like you got it, move it with the pass, and don't dribble. And, I played basketball, but I wasn't very
Mhm.
good, but I was never coached that way. And I started to see like that's just so important, right? You
Yep.
can beat the other team up the floor with that throw ahead. And that speaks to habits, right? Like basketball players, their first instinct is usually what? Boom, 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 boom,
Yep.
put the ball down on the
Yep.
deck and dribble. And you've got to drill that. And you've got to drill that routine into the player's head of like, hey, we're going to practice this every day. Throw ahead, throw ahead, throw ahead. Here's why we're going to do it.
Yep.
If you keep doing it, you're going to see the results. And that's a big part of the mental game in any sport is, hey, just get focused on the process of doing this, understand why you're doing it. And ultimately, it's just going to become second nature and you're going to make better decisions rather than just, okay, I'm going to go default back to putting the ball on the deck and sticking my head down and driving through traffic.
Yeah, no, that actually kind of a funny story based on that. So last night we were playing a game. We were playing a really bad team. It's just a fall league scrimmage game. And I'm talking about my high school team here that
Yep.
I'm helping coach. But so we're beating them by it's like 50-15 in the fourth. My dad's the coach. Me and the other assistant Donnie were like, "Hey, no more pass or no more dribbling. Like we have to pass all the way up the court." And we tried it out, and then us coaches at the end were like, "Yo, we might have to do this in real games." Like we were so
Yeah.
much more productive, and you just see times when guys take dribbles when they didn't need them. Um, yeah, I know we got a little sidetracked here, but
No, that's
I love
awesome.
getting into
I
the
love it.
into the basketball world a little bit since I haven't played in a few months.
Yeah, coaching is also infectious, right? Being on the bench, being with the guys, helping them get better. Like I loved being part of a coaching staff where I would sit on the bench and see the guys every day, watch them in practice, get to talk to them, get to know them. And that's different than what I'm doing now, which is I do a lot of individual work. And there's definitely something to be said for being a mental coach in a team environment because you get to see every single day and build those relationships, which is really critical to being able to help athletes is to really get to know them
Hmm.
and build that trust so that you can then really suggest changes that they're going to make because they trust that you're trying to do the right thing. So
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
what you do is super important.
I
Sorry to
loved it.
cut you off a little bit there,
No,
but
you're good.
I mean, at Boston U, we had like people like yourself within our programs. I mean, there's immense value in that. And a lot of people at lower levels or just younger and not familiar, like they don't understand that.
Hmm.
And if I got to the pros, I would 100% hired my own.
Hmm.
I mean, it's been something back to Army when I went there. They had like 3 people and they really took it seriously. But you're also
Yes.
throwing in military. I mean, you have a
Yes.
lot more to handle mentally. Their schools works harder. Um, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
The military has a very, very strong infrastructure. In fact, the United States military, not the academy, but the military
mhm.
is the largest employer of sports psychology professionals in the United States because they
Wow.
they have a they have a very regimented and wide-reaching mental resilience training program, and so they hire a lot of sports psychology grads to come in and do those trainings for the soldiers, for the active duty military, and so it's the academies are the same, and I love that, and I love to hear that schools have it now. It's interesting because there's so many colleges out there who have a huge investment, more so than the military academy, more so than Boston University, these big
Hmm.
universities, and they don't even make the investments in it. They have one person for a whole, you know, 500 person, athletic department, and they're generating tens of millions of dollars every year. So it's interesting philosophically to see like some schools really buy into it and some schools are just like, we don't need that. They're more into the physical performance side.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's something people don't understand even about college. I mean, D1 and there's stats and whatever, but if you're under 6'4", it's like a 0.001% chance to play college basketball at Division 1 level. So I always pride myself like that's kind of getting back to earlier, like, yo, this is
Mhm.
one of the hardest things to do. And I was
Yeah.
like, I want to do it. Um, but I mean, what comes along with that? I mean, you're a full-time employee. That's why I love seeing the NIL and guys
Mhm.
having opportunities to get paid. But I mean, it wasn't just like, hey, we went to school, we had practice, we had games, we could go party. It was like, no, you're going to wake up on Sunday morning and you're going to go to community service and you're going to go work a walk. And then at 10, you're going to have yoga and you're going to get your body right. And then at 12, you're going to work with the sports psych guy. And then you're going to go to study hall, and it was very regimented.
Mhm.
And that's why it's like funny. 'Cause we always laugh about this because I was like, yeah, I didn't go to the army. And I was like, I think my schedule was just as regimented, if not more,
Yep.
at BU being, D1 athlete. And, we had a good team too. My junior year, we won. This is a story that, people always ask me about. My junior year, we won our conference. So we won the Patriot League, going to
Mhm.
the NCAA tournament, probably going to be a 15 seed, 14, play someone pretty good. But you never know. There's upsets every year. And yeah, COVID happened. So it was my last. So before I wanted to go pro, my last basketball goal was make the NCAA March
Mhm.
Madness tourney. Did it, and yeah, everyone knows kind of where we've been stuck the last couple of years. Yeah.
Very challenging for all college athletes, but certainly like, having reached that goal and not actually getting the chance to play. But I did want to ask you about a little bit more about your transition
Hmm.
into college, right? Obviously your recruiting story is unique. When you get to BU, obviously you said you got hurt, which obviously throws a wrench into it. But like,
Hmm.
can you talk about the transition, like what that was like going from high school to college with that regimented schedule and all these sort of new challenges that maybe you didn't have before?
Yeah, they just throw. You're just thrown into the fire. That's the crazy thing, and they've gotten better there.
Mhm.
They started recruiting differently. They started recruiting a little bit, good basketball players, but better kids and better students. So it's gotten better there, and I think my class actually kind of led that
Mhm.
transition there. But you're thrown in from day one. It's you're not used to waking up early to go lift at 6 in the morning. And then you're not used to going and taking hard classes in the morning and then the afternoon and then go
Mhm.
to study hall. And then you're like, oh, I have all this freedom. I want to go party. Um, you know, it's an interesting transition that people don't account for. Um, because my youngest brother, he's at Miami of Ohio. He just went to school for regular. COVID kind of messed up his basketball career,
Mhm.
just in terms of recruiting and stuff. But my middle brother's at Binghamton, which is also D1 in New York,
Mhm.
playing there. And we just always kind of talk about how my youngest brother's like, yo, I have so much time, I don't know what to do. But me and my other brother, like, time, like we never had time for anything. So for
Mhm.
me, when I first got home and everything happened, I was like, this is like, I need to go build stuff and do stuff because I have so much time. So that transition, it sucked at first, especially my freshman year, and I
Right.
got hurt, which added in rehab and even more stuff. But
Yeah.
then now I'm like so grateful for it because when I wake up at 6 in the morning, I'm like, hey, I'm waking up at 6 in the morning to go write an article instead of
Mhm.
waking up and lifting and getting screamed at and yelled at. And then instead of going to practice, I'm just going to play basketball for fun, and then I'm building something that's cool. So to
Yeah.
me, it's been the transition, like the pain of it has helped now. And I think as trying to be an owner of companies and stuff, I would
Mhm.
hire a college athlete over a regular employee or a regular student any day of the week.
I think that sentiment's pretty consistent, at least anecdotally. I think employers love college athletes for a lot of reasons, but it is the structure and it is the discipline that comes with being a college athlete that really is attractive to employers.
Hmm.
Especially now, right? Like if you're a non-athlete in college, like there's just so many other things you could sort of get into, and there is a lot of free time. And I feel like with social media, people are just even more. And listen,
Nope.
I love social media. It's a huge, valuable tool
Well,
for
look
my
at
for
Instagram,
my business.
Facebook. They got shut down yesterday, and the world was like going crazy.
Yes, and it's funny you say that because people were like talking about that and like, oh, it was a good thing because I can't get to Facebook. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I need to send a post that I was gonna send for my, right? So like
Yeah.
there's good and bad in it, but like I feel like if you're 18, 19 years old and you're in college, like it just becomes so central to your social life. And when you get out, what do? Right? You have to get up and go to college, to go to work at like,
Hmm.
7 o'clock in the morning and you're at work, you got to be productive. Like you can't be on your phone all day. You have to work, and you might have to work late, or you might have to work on a weekend, and you're doing that already. So it just gives a huge advantage to the athlete at that point to say, like, I've already done this. Like, I know how to make it work. So it's a
Yep.
huge advantage for employers.
Yeah. No, I agree 100% with that.
Yeah.
I mean, our whole team at Air, I mean, we're all former, besides our developers in India that are kind of doing the app and the
Yeah.
tech stuff, our, business management side is all former Division 1 college athletes, which
Yep.
is you
Yeah.
don't see, and it's pretty cool. And
Very.
we're all pretty young, which we think is our advantage, not our disadvantage.
I would
Especially in
agree with
this
that.
world of NIL and college recruiting, just changing. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing you don't see very much.
You mentioned that there was a point during college at some point where you sort of said, I don't want to play professional
Hmm.
basketball. Like, what was that? At what point was that? And like, when you sort of decided that in your own mind, like, did you kind of shift to entrepreneurship as sort of the next step for you once you get out of school?
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of been building stuff or finding ways to,
Hmm.
you know, do stuff on the side, make money. I've always enjoyed that building and process. But it was definitely when COVID hit. I was like, this is
Gotcha.
too crazy, and I realized like, the ball's gonna stop bouncing eventually. Um, so whether that's 10 years or 2 months, I was like, I'd rather it be the former. And I also saw some of the guys that went overseas from our team before, and the money is not
Hmm.
great. I'm not saying that's everything. I mean, you get to live in
Right.
another country,
Hmm.
but you're also living in another country. So yeah, you know your teammates, but you don't know anyone else. You're kind of isolated where you
Hmm.
practice, play, and then you're back in your room, and you don't live a ton of that experience.
Hmm.
So I guess yeah, I've kind of from seeing other guys, and
Yeah.
some of them are having an awesome time, and that's their goal, and that's what they want to do, and I respect that. And um, but for me, it was more like, hey, I want to be here in the States, and I want to build something that's going to help a ton of people, and I want
Yeah.
to do ultimately um, what I want to do, which basketball. I'm not going to the NBA. I realized that, so I was like, uh, yeah, let's,
Yeah.
yep.
One of my prior guests, he's a bit older than you. I would say he's probably about 10 years older than you are, but
Hmm.
he tells a story on the podcast, and he's been very open about this. He was a football player at Central Michigan, and he was forced to retire due to back injuries. And he went through a really hard time after that because in his mind, like, the only outcome was professional football. But it wasn't until he found something bigger, right, to look
Hmm.
forward to, where he could really kind of shift his thinking and become, happy again, and really not be in a bad place. And like, that's sort of what you're describing, right? Like, you're looking forward to something bigger. Like, the next chapter of your
Hmm.
life is like, hey, let me build a business or businesses that like gets me out of bed every day, right? Because for a
Yep.
lot of athletes, the only thing that got them out of bed for so long was, I'm going to get to go play. And then they're like, I have to go do a job, or I have to go just do this, or what am I going to do when it's over? Like, it doesn't sound like that's something you're dealing with as much.
No, not now, but I don't want to sugarcoat it. Like there was
Yeah.
a few months where I was like in the dumps, like, yo, what am I doing? I haven't
Yeah.
touched a basketball. That's never happened in my life.
Hmm.
I'm not an athlete anymore. Who am I?
Yeah.
And obviously everything that's been going on played into that a little. And
Sure.
then I met James, who basically founded Air, and we got it rolling in the team, and started doing some of this other stuff that all ties back. We basically say Air is the central, but all our whole team kind of does a few other things on the side to tie it all back to the ecosystem.
Hmm.
That's kind of what we call it. I don't know. Some people call it networking, whatever. It's the same sort of deal. We're just trying to tie it all back. Um, but but yeah, that's I would say most athletes will go through that. They're going to go
Yeah.
through a few months where they're like, who am I? What am I doing? And for me, it was nice because I did have my parents' support where they let me come home and I didn't have to worry about paying a bill or something. But then it was like, okay, buddy, let's go, let's build something. And
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
been fun, and there's no looking back.
Yeah.
And I get to, honestly, the best part is I get to meet people like yourself, and talk to a bunch of cool people throughout it, where to me that's always what I wanted to do. I always like building things, and I like talking to cool people, meeting cool people. And so that's why every day I wake up now, and some of my friends are 24 and they went to they went to college and, hey, it was the best time of my life. Hey, college was great for me too, but what I'm doing now, I still have fun. And to me, it's like they kind of went past their best days.
Mhm.
And I never want that to be me, whether I'm 60 or 20 or 30. So that's kind of my mindset on all that.
Well, I relate to that on many, many levels, right? So I agree with that. Like for me, I'm building something every day and I love to meet good people. That's why I got into this podcast. Like I
Hmm.
like to talk to people, interesting people about cool stuff that's, you know, related to my business. But at the same time, I could tell you, like as an adult, as a parent, like that regret or that sort of what's the right word I'm looking for? The reminiscing about the
Yep.
glory days still happens for people my age who either are living vicariously through their children's sports or they talk about like, oh, back in high school, like, hey, listen, I love a good old high school story with
Yep.
my buddies, right? But like at the same time, like if that's what I'm talking about now, like I'm not as interested in it, right? I'm thinking about like what's tomorrow going to bring? Like what am I doing today to like build my future cuz that's what's important. And it doesn't end and I think that for a lot of people they don't they don't necessarily see the things the way you do, which is to say
Hmm.
like, hey, like I've got this huge opportunity in front of me. I'm going to take a little bit of risk, but I'm
Yep.
getting to build something that's my own versus
Hmm.
like, hey, like I kind of been there, done that. Like I'm just paying the bills now, which listen, there's nothing wrong with that. I know a
No.
lot of people in my life who have a job and they like to have their life the way they have it. Certainly, like I don't live a glamorous life doing what I'm doing because, it's hard, right? Like it's hard,
Yeah.
where's the next dollar coming from and all those things. But at the same time, it's like if I really believe in what I'm doing, which is, clearly what, you're where you're at, you believe in
Hmm.
what you're doing, then it makes it worth it. At least that's my view.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's 100% worth it. My thing has always, and I wrote about this today, that I released. So I have athletes, coaches, parents. I kind of read what I write and put out. So I try to relate a little.
Hmm.
But the thing was like, okay, you got to define a goal. So your goal is whatever, but you got to be really specific. So I'll use basketball's example because
Yep.
that's what we're talking about here. But my goal was always, it wasn't just to be a college basketball player. It was, I wanted to play Division One and I wanted to go to a high academic school. And I
Hmm.
also preferred an urban campus. And I got that. I mean, I didn't get it till 7 days before it's almost slipped away. And there was a bunch of stuff that happened, but I knew that and it set a
Yeah.
direction. Then the second part was you have to work for it. I worked out every day in basketball. That doesn't say I was, going and running and doing crazy stuff. I mean, if it was an off day, I would shoot for 15 minutes and dribble. Like I was always doing something.
Yeah.
So I was always working, moving, compounding, getting 1%. And then the third is there's always to me a struggle. So there's going to be something where the universe is like, no, 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 no. Do you really want this? So that was, me getting hurt, me, not decommitting, schools taking away my offers, all that. And then the fourth, so then to me it's going to happen after that point if you can get through all those. And then the fourth to me is you got to enjoy it, and you got to kind of let it go. You can't, you know what you want, it's going to come. I always kind of have that feeling like it's going to come, but you got to like, and it's hard. Like I struggle with this too. Like I sit here and
Mhm.
talk about this stuff, but we all struggle through this. It's not
Sure.
easy. I mean, you deal with this and what people talk about.
All the time.
um, but I found like when I let it go and I don't constantly like absorb in it, so I wasn't constantly, oh, I got to go do one, I got to go, and just kind of let it. And I'm doing the work, I'm believing, and I have that goal, it will come. And I took that from basketball, and I did a lot of this without knowing any of the science, without reading
Yes.
books. And then I started doing that, and I go, holy crap, I did it not knowing.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now let me go do it knowing, and it's kind of worked in the same direction into business. And that was something, if there's anyone like listening to that, is like set a clear goal, work every day towards it, um, go get through the struggle and the down period and have fun, just enjoy the process and it'll come. Because then you're going to look back, and I look back and go, oh, that was fun getting there, but it wasn't getting D1 that was fun. It was like building myself and getting better, and I'm trying to
Right.
do the same thing now, and I'm sure you feel the same
Uh,
way. And yeah.
so it's so fascinating on so many levels because there's the mental performance coaching work that I do is part like I deal with that all the time with especially with high school athletes who are the recruiting and commitments and
Hmm.
scholarship offers are like the biggest thing, right? So to your point, one, they don't know the criteria for the schools they want to be at, right? They don't think about it and say, like, this is what's really important to me. They just say, like, hey, I want to take the first offer, or like, I just want to be wanted, right? There's that. Then when they don't get that result that they want, they get really demotivated, and they get, in some cases, get, like, I wouldn't say, they get, they experience some depression around it because
Yeah.
they're trying so hard, but they're not getting the result, which means they're not really enjoying the process of being an athlete and making themselves better. And it's like this, it's all about motivation, right? What you just described is like, you set goals to motivate yourself, you do the work every day, right? You get comfortable with the process, and you try to enjoy it so that it's sustainable. Because
Hmm.
otherwise, if you're just getting feedback based on the result, you're going to burn out. Right.
Yep.
And so it's the same for me personally in my business, right? There are some days, like, and I'm sure you have this experience. I know I do, where I'm working all the time. I could work for a week and not get a phone call and not get an email. And I go, well, what am I doing here? Right. But then I have to remind myself, like, hey, you're doing this because you love it. Every day it's an investment, and the you're going to get a return. It's just a long-term play. And
Yep.
so, like, but we all need that feedback, right? And so that's the struggle, right? How do we create the conditions for us to get that feedback, right? So I'll do something else. I'll do something new. I'll change something I'm doing. And I think a lot of young people struggle with that, right? It sounds like you're the exception, but I think for a lot of young people, they don't really are not really comfortable with the idea of, like, what can I do differently today, because they don't want to be uncomfortable, or they're not used to
Yep.
failing, and they don't want to put themselves in that position. So they just don't do anything. But then they get frustrated, like, hey, why isn't this changing? And I'll be like, well, why isn't it changing? I don't know. I'm not really doing anything different. Yeah, no kidding, right? Like, so, like, it all goes back to what I do. It's not, and in a lot of ways, it's not rocket science what I do, but I love to be able to be the facilitator for these young
Yep.
athletes, to make them think about what's really important. What's really important to you. I actually, it's funny. I have a client who's very similar to your situation, plays a different sport, but, like, he had real strong interest from a couple of NESCAC schools, like
Hmm.
Division III, but high
Yeah,
academic,
yeah, yeah. Good schools.
good, great schools,
It's
right?
like
And
Williams College, Amherst. Yeah.
exactly. So those are basically the two schools. And academically, it turns out that he was sort of like on the fringe, and things didn't work out for him. And now he's sort of had to reevaluate. Like, I didn't know where he really wanted to go. Now he's looking at prep school, right? And so
Hmm.
it turns out that could really be a blessing for him, in the sense that maybe prep school is the way he needed to go to get that extra year, to kind of get more seasoning, to rethink things, put himself in a better position. But like you said, like, you were ready to do that. And then all of a sudden you got the result that you wanted, but you weren't expecting it. You were just sort of focused on, okay,
Hmm.
what can I control? I think it's just, the stories are so great for young athletes to understand that it doesn't have to be the same formula, right? I get offered as soon as possible, and then I go off and play Division I, and everything's going to be perfect. It's like, that's just not the way the world works.
Yeah. No, I mean, well said. Yeah. I mean, you summed it up.
I'm on my soapbox.
No, I love it. You summed it up perfectly. um, I love it. But I mean, a lot of that, I would credit this. I mean, obviously, my parents did a great job and instilled good stuff in me. I mean, I think that's huge, and a lot of kids don't have that. And so that's where someone like yourself is very influential. And I've tried. I mean, we built a platform, so not as much like a service. I mean, we
Mhm.
want it that way for kids with Air. I'm talking about. But the biggest thing for me was just reading books. And I will promote that to the day I
Mhm.
die. Is that like you get the experience without the mistakes. Like you see what worked for other people, what hasn't. Um, so I don't know if you ever read Atomic Habits by James Clear, but I mean that's one where I'm like, holy crap, this guy went through 5 years to find the best habits and how to change habits. So you read that book, and now I know how to create good habits just from him instead of going through it myself. And now I'm, 35, and I learned myself when I can just I read one chapter a night for 7 days, and I read that, and now I have better habits as long as you put it to work. So I've always said reading's huge, and that's changed, and I'll always recommend that to kids.
I love it. It's good advice. A lot of kids don't love to read. I will say this though, I'm an early adopter of James Clear. I would read his blog, and I've never read the book. It's on my shelf, but I used to read his blogs, and I was always fascinated by the way he thought about things, because it's so commonsensical and so simple, but it's right on point, right? So I was at a baseball camp this summer. The high school I worked at for a
Mhm.
bit, the coach invited me to come down, and I did like a little 15-minute talk for some of the kids, like just kind of in a break period about the mental side of baseball. And I started talking to the kid, and he's like, one of these kids said, "Oh yeah, I'm reading this book. My trainer recommended." I'm like, "Oh, what is it?" He's like, "Atomic Habits." The kid was like 14 years old, and I was like, "Dude, you are on your way to
Mhm.
like you're on your way, right?" Because for a
Yep.
14, 15-year-old kid to read a book like that and go like, "Hey, I just need to know how to build good habits and I'm going to put the work in to do that." Like it translates into every area of your life. And it's like, you can learn it at 35 or 40 or whatever. The sooner the better though, like you said.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just implementing those little things. And it compounds. I really
Yeah.
like so the compound effect. I don't know if you ever read that book, but that's the book that like ignited me into good habits. And then you read Atomic Habits, and now you like it just compounds on
Yes.
compounds, and so I love that kind of stuff. I can always get real and deep and
Yeah.
in depth into that kind of stuff because that's like success and like what makes people, why is one person, why can one person, go and play Division 1 basketball and one can, or why can one do this and it's yeah, I mean that stuff always fascinates me.
Okay. So probably a good transition point to talk about air athletes
Mhm.
in recruitment, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell us about what the company is all about, what the business is, and how it works?
Yeah, for sure. So James is the original founder, and then he brought me in like pretty soon after his idea stemmed. And so there's like me and two other guys on the founding team. And our whole basis is that recruiting is flawed and it's all like service based. And they try to get colleges to pay and or kids to pay. And we
Mhm.
were like, wait, okay, there's all these social media platforms that kids use all the time.
Mhm.
And dating is the same psychology as recruiting. There's two
Mhm.
sides and they both need to tango. And there's a third party, which is like the parent, the high school coach, that intermediates it. Let's bring them all together in one place, give them all the social tools, and give it to them for free. And on a business model side, obviously we need to make money. We just
Mhm.
run advertisements. If the product's free, you are the product kind of motto. I'm sure you've heard that before. It's like a Twitter or
Yep.
Instagram, whatever. Um, and give everyone the tools. So the liaison, which say it's a private trainer, or a recruiting service private trainer, even someone like yourself, you
Yep.
can help the athlete get recruited by facilitating connection, but you can also build your own business because it's all the athletes in one place. The
Yep.
college coach, so we like to say, and right now we're just in football, but we'll be in all 34 sports, men's and women's, here in the next 12 months. But we like to say there's two types of coaches, the one that's fired and the one that's going to be fired. So it enables them the chance to network and build their resume as well. On top of that, recruit, find their ideal player,
Mhm.
because the player plugs in, hey, I'm 6'4", I'm a 200-pound quarterback from Alaska. And the coach goes, hey, I'm looking for guys over 6'2" that are quarterbacks from Alaska. And they can see all those players. And quickly, because of the Tinder model, in 30 seconds, they can tell athletically, is this kid good enough or not? Swipe left or right or click in and see everything about the kid. So we're like, hey, let's do this for free. Let's get to everyone. We've created some real rumble in some of the space because there's been no real advancements, and these companies have just been raking in money from both sides, coaches and
Mhm.
athletes. And we're like, hey, let's disrupt this. Let's help everyone, like everyone in the process, and give it to them for free. And so
Yeah.
we're a little over 4 months in, 50,000 plus users, 250 coaches, whole bunch of liaisons, and yeah, I mean the goal now is to get to every sport and start raising our Series A here in a couple months, and we're going to try to get one of our models is get pro athletes, like top pro athletes with big followings, big name, image, and likenesses,
Sure.
get them to invest. So now it's like, hey, Jenny Finch softball, I promote this, or
Yep.
Bryson DeChambeau golf, like people like that, LeBron, Kate,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a journey, and we're looking forward to it. So
Yeah, it's
just a day at a
a
time.
lot of
Yeah.
fun, a lot of fun. But what you described actually, sort of the way you described it, hit me right. Everything's a relationship business,
Hmm.
right? And so, like the point you made about coaches that are fired and the ones that are going to be fired is a perfect metaphor, right? For what it is to say, like, hey, if I'm a coach and I'm thinking about this the right way, like maybe I got fired and I'm going to go get another job, but that I still have a relationship with that player. I want them to come with me, right? So it's not so much the school, and you hear this a lot, right? Recruiting isn't necessarily about the destination, it's about the person who recruited you, right?
Mhm.
So when a coach gets fired, what happens? Kids transfer, right? Because they trusted the
Yep.
coach. And so having these relationships and starting to build them in this way, in this sort of platform is really intriguing. What's the functionality of the platform? Meaning, like, what can a player or coach or a parent, the school, what can they populate in there? Like, what kind of data do they put in there?
Yeah, I mean, they can put everything. I mean, we want as much visibility as possible. Um, so traditionally, you upload your film and maybe
Mhm.
you just write your GPA, but no one really knows. Like, hey, you run a 4 or 5 and you lift 250 pounds, but no one really knows. So we've
Mhm.
also added in like you can put a video, you can put a picture
Right.
to like prove it as well. I mean, we really think it's like that all in one. We've given the athlete, the coach, and the parent, and anyone else involved every tool they need to get through the recruiting process. And as
Mhm.
NIL comes, it's only advancing because now kids, I mean, because we developed, it's a platform, not a service. Say in 2 years, NIL's legal completely in high school.
Sure.
We can add in functionality for kids to upload their store or upload their brand or their podcast